Talking nerdy. We're just talking nerdy. With all this talking nerdy. Oh, come on, you wanna talk nerdy?
Well, Chris, here we are. We're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, the new movie. This time, the new movie, because we watched the really old one, as some of my friends try to call it, the one that shall not be named.
And can I just say, I had a blast watching the old movie because I love bad movies. It is so much fun to watch a bad movie.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack in that old movie. Here, we're going to talk about the new one because we got to go see it a week early because we used Google search and found sneak previews.
I want to dive right into it. This is
Yes.
Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves.
Wait,
and
but first,
there is
Chris,
going to be spoilers.
Yes,
So I'm letting
spoilers,
everyone
yes.
know we're going to go right into it. If you haven't seen it, go see it.
Probably see it first, yeah. Unless you don't mind having spoilers, because we're going to find the fun and the joy, and we're also going to find the problems.
I think there's going to be some things. We'll try and do both.
I have a couple things that I need to kind of complain about.
We're going to meet the Board of Sweaty Nerds version of Frank here.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, I want to start off just in general. If you have not seen the movie and you're just curious about like, well, should I see it? Here's the overview of what it is. Okay, it's based on the game. It takes place in Faerun, which is a major intellectual property for Dungeons and Dragons.
So glad
And
they did that.
It's basically like taking all of that, and then they plugged in the movie, and people are exploring and doing all sorts of stuff throughout the big continent that is Faerun. Here's the plot in a short paragraph. A charming thief and a band of unlikely adventurers embark on an epic quest to retrieve a long-lost relic, but their charming adventure goes dangerously awry when they run afoul of the wrong people. That is a very general way of describing a bunch
Any
of
movie.
yahoos go on an adventure. Its budget was $151 million, and it was directed by two people, which is, I thought, interesting. I guess they didn't want to win an Oscar with it. Because if you have two directors, you actually can't be nominated for Best Director. I think that's a rule.
Oh.
Yeah,
Makes
that's
sense.
actually a rule. Yeah, that's why Quentin Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez couldn't get nominated for something. I think it was Sin City, or Sin City couldn't get nominated. Anyway, currently everyone out there is freaking out about how good this is because there's a lot of people online, some of which who you might be able to trust them, you might not be able to trust them. Some of them might be in Wizards of the Coast pockets, some of them might not. I will just preface this that Wizards of the Coast has not spent a dime or a notice on either one of us. And one of the reasons might be my rap song that dragged them over the coals for the last, OGL situation. But it also could be just that we haven't got famous yet.
I think the line in your song specifically about dragging D's nuts across, what was it?
Have you ever fought a mind dragon? Would you mind dragging nuts across your face or something like that? Yeah.
Yeah, that line specifically, I think Hasbro said no. No. We make toys. We don't make nasty sayings like this about us.
And Rotten Tomatoes gave it 90%, which is really high.
That is for Rotten Tomatoes.
IMDb, it's an 8 out of 10 right now, 75% on Metacritic. And 94% of Google users said they liked this movie, which means, and it's not even out yet. So this is a very concentrated audience of influencers and people who saw sneak previews and people who have pirated it probably in some weird capacity. And then people who are like us and just like bought a ticket to a sneak preview.
Yeah. I mean, it came out earlier in Australia. I think it came out about a week early in Australia, and I think the UK as well. So it's been a really interesting release schedule for this movie because they're doing it in ways to build hype. Because
they built so much hype.
It's nuts because they really, I think, I mean, the fact that we got to see these sneak previews, it was through a specific movie theater down here, and I'm pretty sure it was all part of this plan to start to build more hype. They've put so much money into this movie on the marketing side. I was really surprised to hear you say their budget was $150 million for this movie.
Yeah, they even had Mr. Beast do a small bit for this movie. It's crazy. I saw one guy whose name is Amaury Gouchon. He did on Netflix School of Chocolate. He was the chocolatier who makes crazy things. He made a Dungeon and Dragon. He made a dragon, but it was like
Whoa.
Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves was the opener of his video. So even like they just have gone really, really granular with a lot of social media influencers trying to get people from all these little walks of life to come check out this movie and know that this
Oh,
movie's coming out.
and on top of that, there was a UFC cage that had Dungeons and Dragons right on the center of their mat.
I mean, that sounds kind of hilarious because it's like people die on here, right? Like this is
Yeah.
this is one of those welcome to the octagon. And
Fight
then,
to the death.
but D&D, right? Like all
Yeah.
imaginary fighting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do want to preface this with a couple things. All right. It's March. Traditionally, the worst movies of the year and the weirdest movies of the year come out in this month. So to take example, basically March tends to be, it's like, okay, it's right after when the Oscars were done, right? Like the Oscars were like a week or two ago. And so everyone is like hyped up over the Oscars and all the big movies are getting watched up until the Oscars. And then right after that, we're all kind of Oscared out. There's maybe a week or two of like people checking out the movies they didn't check out, but then it's kind of like done. And then when people's expectations are the absolute highest for movies, they drop these movies in March, and they tend to be movies that are not that are usually like, I think, not very good. They know they're not going to be that great, or they're like lower budget, or they're like experiments. Like, okay, we don't know if this is going to work, so like put it out in March. It has no competition, and if it's okay, maybe it can be something we release later. Unlike the original Dungeons and Dragons, which got released in December during Oscar season and was the worst goddamn movie of the year probably, and got released during Oscar season. So this is a great time of year for this movie to come out. I'll just mention from a marketing perspective, because it does not have much competition. It's up against John Wick 4, which is, I mean, it's number 4. So I never saw the first one, actually. We should probably, I've never
People
seen it.
say that the fourth one is very good.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's up against that, right? And that's the biggest movie right now that has come out. Other than that, there really is not a lot of big movies coming out. Dungeons and Dragons is it. And it's before all of those big blockbusters that come around in the summertime, like April, May, June. That's when all the Marvel stuff hits. That's when all these other big blockbusters and like summertime exciting movies, they all hit the theaters. And this is like, we don't know. The last D&D movie kind of sucked, didn't do that well. Let's just drop it in March. So I think they're really playing it safe in some ways by over promoting and releasing in March.
I think you're right. And that's a great preface to put in before we dive into it. So without any further ado, I suggest we hop in and talk about the story and then talk about the characters, because
I think you should give me a 1-word opinion review of this for the people who don't want to listen to the whole thing.
Worth it.
With a hyphen, okay. I'll give it to you. I'll give you that.
As a one term.
One term. Okay.
What about you?
It was fine.
Fine. I would say it was worth the 2-hour investment. I
Two
came
and
out
a half hours. Let's keep it ready. This is a longer movie, but it moves.
My Fitbit thought that I was asleep during this movie. Like it logged. I was like, I got a lot of good sleep last night. Why do I have such a nice score? And I was like, oh, it thought I was asleep during the movie. That's unusual. Except I was not. I definitely was not. I was definitely engaged. So I have questions for you, but I don't want to jump the gun. I want us to get into a little bit of this. So the story, I think you summed it up really well. And one of the biggest surprises that hit me is that Chris Pine's character has a daughter. The trailer told you nothing of that. And that is probably my biggest gripe with this story is, and it's really not that big, is that Chris Pine has a relationship that is not very well established. Like his daughter is just like, I never believed the whole relationship there. I'm just going to say that right out of the gate, that's my biggest gripe.
I think, okay, I can understand why you would say that, but I will say without the daughter, there's almost no emotional standing room in this entire movie for any of the characters.
Yes.
Like the thing I want to say is this movie moves. And I like that about it. You get it. You get in the theater and you're like, they go from one scene to the next, to the next, to the next. And it's like, there's no room for this thing called emotional buildup or long drawn out scenes of backstory and figuring out like, oh, I don't give a shit that Chris Pine has a daughter. I don't need to know that, oh, he loves his daughter. We don't need these long drawn out scenes of like him, raising her and like all like we don't need any of that. All we need to know is he has a daughter and that's it. And then they move to the next one. And I don't want to say this is a good movie, but it is a good movie for its time. So what that means is like it's a great movie to watch in March. It is. Will this be one of the greatest movies of the year? I don't think so.
No.
And I think that honestly, like what we get out of it, the number one thing is fun. It is very similar to the way you would consider being a Dungeons and Dragons person. Like if you're showing up to a D&D game and you have fun at the D&T table, it doesn't really matter the plot. It doesn't really matter what happened. It really doesn't matter what characters or what. It just matters that we all had fun. And it kind of feels that's the tone they decided to take with this entire movie. And in many ways, I think that's why I say it's fine.
Exactly. It's fun. And I guess we really haven't gotten too many spoilers, which is perfect. I think it's really fun that this movie, if you are a Dungeons and Dragons fan, which you very likely are if you're listening to this, then you will appreciate this on the level, Chris may not agree with me, but on the level of the first Avengers. Because when the first Avengers came out, we had this hype. We had the origin stories for almost every single character. And when they came together, we were like, oh, yes, like big nerd hurrah celebration. This is like that because, and I say it, if you're a D&D fan, it's going to feel like that because they bring in places you're familiar with. They bring in Waterdeep. They bring in gods you know. They bring in other regions that you know, and it feels like, oh my gosh, the Underdark. I love this. They bring in that dragon that you've seen in the trailers. They bring him in, and you're like, wow, like this is so funny and hilarious. And they bring in like halflings. They bring in surprisingly few of the non-traditional first player handbook ones. Like there's humans, halflings, elves, tieflings. There's not a lot else though.
Don't expect the tiefling to look cool though. Can I just pause on that for a second?
Yes. If you've seen the trailer, you've seen the tiefling.
Yeah, the tiefling is like, okay, there's some cool, like the Dragonborn in the first scene. Great. There's an Aarakocra in the first scene, which was hilarious. And I thought that was fun.
That was great.
But then when you get, and they're all like costume, animatronic, things like that. It's not all CG, which I really appreciated as well because I was more into that. I was more immersive, and there was some CG, but it wasn't. And it wasn't like the top-notch Marvel CG, but it wasn't terrible, like either. Yes. It wasn't so bad to be distracting from the game, from the movie, except for the potato. So there was one thing with the potato. The potato looked like garbage when
the slow-mo potato.
Yeah, it looked like garbage. But honestly hilarious because it looks so bad that maybe it'll even become like a meme or something. We'll see.
It wasn't okay. I didn't think that was that bad, but. As far you're talking about the potato throw at the very end.
Yeah, I like to spoil the end before everything.
Okay, so as far as the story though, I think I really liked the way the story jumped around. Like you said, I really liked how they didn't waste time getting into the action. They assembled the crew, they assembled the team, they got out of prison. It was like boom, boom, boom. They were in Icewind Dale, then they were in like Neverwinter, and that was like instant. And at first I was kind of like, I don't really like this. I wish I had seen more of the journey. But then I'm like, there's a classic, rule when you play D&D that is if there's no plot or story developed on the journey, you don't need to have it in the game at the table unless your players really want it. Just skip it because you're just wasting time pretty much. You're wasting the table's time and fun.
Yeah, it felt very much like a dungeon master wrote this and also feels a little bit like a dungeon master didn't plan a ton either because it was one of those things where it's like, okay, they're in Icewind Dale, and then they escape, and then they're going to go to Neverwinter, and then what if the guy is who betrayed them has taken over Neverwinter, and then then there's a mimic, and then there's going to be a whole maze, and that's going to be cool. And like
displacer beasts.
Yeah, and this is one of those what I call and then scripts where like that's all they do. It's like and then this, and then this, and then this, and then this, and then we go to the Underdark, and then we see a dragon, and then we do this because it is kind of all it is. Like it's I want to say it's popcorn because none of these characters have any depth in my opinion. Like
Yeah.
Chris Pine and Michelle Rodriguez, who is playing the barbarian. Those two are the acting chops and the through line of this movie that carry the movie, really. Like without them and Hugh Grant, I'll say, I think the movie
Yeah.
would fall apart. Like Chris Pine did a great job of just being relatable and nice and charming and everything, but he doesn't do anything. He doesn't do spells. He doesn't fire a weapon. He doesn't really do much at all. He's just the classic useless bard, but he talks well and he's delightfully charming.
He
And
has
that's
plans.
yeah, and he's the guy who comes up with the plan and then comes up with the new plan, which was kind of funny. Like I think there was a
Yeah.
lot of nice references to the tropes that we see in Dungeons and Dragons. So if you're a real Dungeons and Dragons fan, you're going there and you're like, "Oh, that's cool. Oh, I like to see that. Oh yeah, they didn't fuck that up. That's nice." You know, like there's a lot of things that we will get and feel good about. I am curious if someone who's not a D&D fan will think this movie is great or if it's fun. I think kids will love it. I don't know. I don't know what someone would like who's just like a teenager or like a 20-year-old going to the movies is going to think if it's too I don't want to say campy. Maybe it's a little campy, but it's too surface level. I don't know.
Yeah, I do think I also would be curious about that. I know that this weekend I'm going to be going to see it again, but with my dad this time. And he has played a little bit of Dungeons and Dragons with me, but he hasn't played a lot. So he's not going to get most of the references, especially on the granular level that you and I will get, like the locations, the spells. And speaking of spells, quick tangent. When at the end, the final battle, when Justin Smith's character, the sorcerer, is able to throw up his shield that protects the party, I hope someone will like at me about this because why don't we have a spell in Dungeons and Dragons that creates a shield over the party?
I don't know. That's a great question.
I really want. I'm gonna make one. I'm gonna make one because there should be one.
The other question is like, why can't druids turn into owlbears? Well, update: Wizards of the Coast, because of this movie, will probably be making that a wild shape thing in D&D 1.
I bet.
I've
there's gonna
heard
be.
that. So D&D 1 might actually make some other things cool, and they can turn into owlbears, which would be a fun extra little thing to do.
I really like what they did with that. It was really fun. It was. I mean, they definitely took that moment out of the Avengers where she's smashing the bad sorcerer into the ground, like, but they did it longer. And I
Yeah.
was like, okay, like at first I was like, okay, they're just straight up copying this, and then I was like, okay, now they're having fun with this. Okay, this is kind of funny now.
Yeah. I guess, like I said, overall, you go in and it's like, I'm ready for fun. I think this is one. Here's my tip. If you're going to see this movie, don't go alone. Go with a group of people who have a real interest in D&D or are ready to be excited about a movie like this. And all of you will laugh, get the references, have a blast, and actually do it. But watching this on my own, I'd feel like, I feel like it's too shallow for me. You know what I mean? If I'm watching on my own. But if you want to have a really great time and enjoy it, go with a bunch of people. Get your D&D group together and just like go and enjoy it. Get some popcorn. It's popcorny fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wasn't disappointed. That's the most important thing I guess I could say is there wasn't a disappointment at the end. Whereas like almost everything I've had around D&D and Wizards of the Coast lately has been a disappointment. And so that's a tall praise from me.
That's a really big praise for you right there, that you weren't disappointed. Ladies and gentlemen, it has gotten Chris's official stamp of approval. Not disappointed.
Yeah, I will say, you know, the Michelle Rodriguez, I always enjoy her in movies. I think she does a great job.
Mhm.
And across from Chris Pine, the two of them are awesome. And it's kind of funny because there are some great scenes where the dynamic, like you know, they keep getting into trouble, getting caught, and then they escape out of, like the way they escape out of getting caught is always hilarious. But it feels like a D&D game where like, oh, I can't believe the friggin' party has done this stupid thing. Now I've got them caught. Then what do? They do some stupid crazy move to try and get out of it. Like, oh, I'm going to lift up the brick from the floorboards and hold it up over my head before the guard chops my head off. Like, okay, roll. Let's see if that works. You know what I mean? And of course, like, you know, they get a good roll and all of a sudden that works and they wind up getting out of it. Right. So, and once they get moving in a direction, like the bard is like Chris Pine's character is trapped with rope and he's trying to cut it over and over and over again
On a step
trying to get out. Whereas Michelle Rodriguez, the barbarian, has already escaped and is just like
She's just kicking
destroying
ass.
everybody in front of them.
That was one of those scenes that were so good.
Yeah.
And I got to say, the final battle was actually really nice. I actually really liked the final battle. There were some moments that did feel a little cheap, but all in all, like I thoroughly enjoyed it. The dynamic, I will say, I really enjoyed how Michelle and Chris's characters, they were always there for each other. They were always at each other's back, like
Mhm.
supporting each other. Like when she had to have the talk with her ex and she had to get her stuff, he was there and supportive. And I thought that was a really nice moment. Okay, I didn't like the execution of the song that he played. It felt like the whole thing was kind of forced, but I still feel like it delivered on the like let me be a shoulder for you. Let's sing a song together. Like let's be happy and merry despite the hardships in life. And I really liked their dynamic and their friendship because it sets us up to feel like we have people that we care about because they care about each other.
Mhm.
And that's a great element in an adventure together.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, they basically escape from prison through a really funny means, which I thought like Jonathan, which is
Yes.
already made me feel like, oh, this is like the DM didn't know what to say for the
Yeah.
name. Like anytime someone's like, "What's their name?" and Jonathan, damn it. And and when
Yes.
when they're like, "Oh yeah, well don't worry, well, Jonathan's going to be there, we'll get out, right? We'll
Is he?
use
Is
him."
he? Yeah. Is he going to be here? Like, my story would mean a lot more if he was here. Like that. That was so good. He
It
kept
was
coming
great.
back to that.
But then of course he's an Aarakocra, and so you think, oh, maybe like he'll feel the worst for them, or maybe there's something that way. But in actuality, what happens is they just grab him and then run with him, throw him out the window, and hold on while they yell at him to fly as before they hit the
Yeah.
ground,
Yeah.
which is a wonderful, crazy thing to do, and it goes great and is really. A kind of instantly a way to set the tone for the entire movie. This is not Lord of the Rings, right? This is
Mhm.
not going to be this like hard fantasy. This is going to be quippy. It's going to be funny. It's going to be a little unexpected. It's going to be moving fast, and there isn't going to be. It's going to be a shallow pool. All right, we're not doing anything too deep. What do we do? We got to go to Neverwinter. Okay, you got to get this, and then after that, oh, we got to go get this, and then after that, we got to go get this, and it's always like very clear objectives around like, all right, well, now we have to go get this person in order to get this person to get that, very like similar to the way D&D is. And so I don't know if this is a criticism or not. I just don't know if it is, but like the fact that it is so similar to a D&D game is in some ways great, but also D&D is not like Hollywood level movies. Like you almost expect a movie to go a little above and beyond in terms of its depth and scale and reality and how you portray like as a good movie. I don't know. Is it? But it's good considering it's about D&D and it feels very Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, it does feel very Dungeons and Dragons. I loved it. In fact, I wanted to back up what you said earlier about all the locations they go. What do you think was your favorite location that they visited? Because there's some great places in there that tap into where people commonly will take their adventuring party.
Honestly, I'm not very attached to any of that. I've barely played any of the Wizards of the Coast or D&D materials. I'm not attached to Faerun at
Well,
all.
okay, don't
So
think
I
about
so
Faerun, but like the scenes, the locations, like what was something that stood out to you that you really enjoyed and being influenced by the location?
I had nothing. I don't remember. I don't even remember. It's all just like bright fantasy. Like I know that there were places. I thought the big Colosseum was cool.
Yeah.
That was cool because I like Colosseum. Like Gladiator's one of my favorite movies of all time. Like I like that style of a movie, and I want to see a exciting battle gladiator type scene. And so that was a neat location. But honestly, like I don't really have any attachment to anything. Like I know people are going to be like, "Oh, they went to the Underdark, isn't that cool?" It's like I don't give a shit. Like I also don't feel like we saw anything that's that cool in the Underdark. Really, consider like there was no mind flayers, there's no drow, there was none of like there's a lot of
Well,
things.
okay, the Underdark was actually a bit of a letdown for the most part, and I want to clarify there were some things I didn't appreciate how they said it's going to take us a day to get there, and then whenever you say how long it's going to take, and then you make it happen instantly, and you don't even have a breaking for camp, like okay, that's a bit annoying for me. I know I just said that I like that they were quick, quick, quick the way they got around, but they didn't say in any of those times how long it was going to take. Anyway, we saw the Drow City. I'm drawing a blank on it. I want to say Nebuchadnezzar.
Hmm.
that is the Matrix. That's the
Yeah.
ship in the Matrix. But anyway, what I really liked, and I wish we could have seen them go into that Drow City. I really liked after that they were in this dwarven hall of craftsmanship, and then we got to see the dragon. I thought that the dragon was a really classic way to make a movie endearing, is that they made a creature like an animal that we all know, like a cat or a dog. It was a chonky cat or a chonky dog.
It was a nice play on the dragon, because it was like,
Yes.
because there's been a lot of and to keep it in the campy funny sort of range, instead of like dragons are scary, because dragons have kind of been done to death. Like
Yeah.
the first movie had dozens of
Ugh.
awful CG dragons in it. And it can't be a Dungeons and Dragons movie without a dragon. I mean, it's in the friggin' title. If they didn't have a dragon in there, there would be a problem. So there has to be one. But you go to Lord of the Rings and it's like, oh, all these dragons, and then there's How to Train Your Dragon, and then there's like, Dragon Lance, and like, oh, just so many.
It was at this moment that he knew. He fucked up.
Hey everybody, it's Chris popping in here. I meant to say Game of Thrones, but wound up saying Dragonlance instead. Probably because that guy Joe Manganiello, I think that's it, right? Maggot Yellow, something like that, is making his own Game of Thronesy version of Dragonlance novels right now. If you want to hear our opinions on TV shows like that when they come out, go subscribe to our YouTube channel at Nerdpreneur Podcast. If you know Joe Maggot Fellow and can get us into a pre-screening to anything to do with Dragonlance, hey, send us an email to nerds@nerdpreneurpodcast.com or DM us on Insta or Twitter. Now back to the show.
There's dragons everywhere, right? This was interesting because it was just like, oh, by the way, this dragon's lazy and fat. And so
it can hardly get out of its own cave.
Yeah, exactly. Like it was kind of a nice play on it, and it's chasing after them, and it was hijinksy, and it was very much like a heist. It felt like a heist, and that's good.
Yeah,
I think that was a good move.
That was probably my favorite location.
Unexpected was that, but it was good. Like, again, is this a in-depth crazy movie? No, but it was a decent movie, and I am excited to say that I think people at this time of year will like it. I don't think what it's up against in competition, it's going to be the most fun escapist kind of movie that you could go see at the box office right now. And it's not something like, if you're a John Wick fan, go John Wick 4, cool, right? But it's going to be the same thing that John Wick always is, which is a lot of people dying and
John Wick kicking ass and almost dying.
Pretty much, that's just what it is, right? Well, D&D, like if you're looking for something a little lighter, where it's like not everybody's gonna die, and there's gonna be sort of a ups and downs and fun and quips, and you're not looking for depth, you're just looking for something that moves, is fun, engaging. This is a great movie for that. I think if it were in the summer up against a lot of these Marvel movies or against other things, it would suffer. And so for a March movie, which is a very special time of year for movies, like I said, I've already explained that at the beginning. For this, it is a great March movie.
Yeah, I think it's right below some of those AAA Marvel movies. I think it's a little bit below some of them, and I'm thinking like AAA would probably be like Thor Ragnarok, Guardians of the Galaxy 1. Like those were just killer Marvel movies. And I think this is just one step below that, but it is definitely a step above Quantumania. It is a step above some of the other more recent Marvel movies, like, the last Thor, Love and Thunder. Like, it is above those. And if you have Marvel fatigue, perfect. You're going to enjoy this because it's different. It's not completely predictable. It is in some ways, but it's not completely predictable. And you're going to enjoy it. And like I said, it's worth the time.
And there's some great moments to make you laugh, and they never really get too heavy. Even like the parts that are supposed to be kind of heavy are kind of light, know, and you're just like, and even though it runs 2.5 hours almost, you don't feel it really. It kind of, like I said, this movie doesn't spend any time in travel. It doesn't spend a lot of time in setup. It doesn't spend a lot of time in making you feel things about any of the characters.
Character development is minimal.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter if those characters develop or not. They're objective characters. They're like, I need to get this thing so that I can do this thing. And it's very similar to the way a D&D campaign would be. It's like pretty shallow characters moving through a world that's crazy and has all sorts of magic and not so things that they can encounter.
So I did want to ask you a pretty important question Actually, I have two important questions. The first one is, was that Bradley Cooper?
Yes.
I thought so. I was looking for that on the IMDb, and it's not on there.
Yeah, I bet you he just wanted to be unlisted. And by the way,
Yeah.
the second worst CG part of this was Bradley Cooper.
The halflings.
Because it was funny. Okay, the gag is this. Again, spoilers coming, right? But the gag is the barbarian female, right? Whose I think name is Holga. She, of course, big burly one, played by Michelle Rodriguez, has got like arms exposed, tattoos everywhere, hauling a massive double-handed axe, and is just, brutish. Well, she likes halflings, little tiny men, right? Of course. And the little tiny man is played by Bradley Cooper. And they have this nice scene, which is kind of funny and sweet, because it is funny that he's small and that she's big, and that's the way it is. But the CG on it, like the way it took me a little bit out of it. It looks kind of crap.
Lord of the Rings did a better job with their Hobbit CGI.
100%. Yeah. I don't know. They probably should have done something with a different set or something to make it so that, I don't know. It just felt like they did it cheaply or not that great.
They did it for a cheap laugh, I think.
Yeah. It felt like, oh wait, Bradley Cooper's in the next lot. Hey, do you want to be in the D&D movie? Yeah, sure. Don't credit me or anything. I'll just come in and do it. We need someone to play a halfling. We'll put you in. It's like literally he like filmed it somewhere and they're like, we'll just CG you in. Don't worry. Thanks so much for stopping by. Like it was like in and out in 20 minutes maybe he did this, It's a very short scene, not too heavy. There's only a couple moments in it, but it does end kind of funny because like since they've split up, there is that one the big lady, his new girlfriend is also a very large barbarian woman, which is kind of funny.
So compared to him, she's big.
Yeah, this is a very inoffensive movie. I'll mention that. I think you would be very, very hard pressed. Even the wokest of woke people, I think, would be hard pressed to find something that really, really pisses them off in this movie. It's got a very diverse cast. It's got people from all walks of life, ages and ranges. It doesn't say anything about races, or there's no analogies to races. Even the tiefling has like no color to their skin. Like they didn't make her purple or blue or like red or anything like that, just because who knows what could happen. Someone could get offended by something, right? So I feel like they went a very safe direction in every one of their choices that way, just because they're like, we do not want to piss off anyone in this. We want D&D for everyone, which is important.
Now that we've talked about so many good things, and I honestly could continue to sing the praises of this movie, but
one thing I want to talk about before we move into anything out, there's a couple things I want to know. What was your opinion of the Paladin?
I love that actor. I saw Bridgerton season 1, and I really loved like his work, not just his naked bare ass. I really
Jean Page.
Yeah, I really appreciated his acting, and I really loved how he brought that turmoil from Bridgerton. But in this, I laughed a lot, like really hard, about how hard they were trying to make him be this like amazing person. And I thought about it later, and I was like, I feel like this is the NPC that the DM brings in to be like, this is what you could be as a, like, if you weren't freaking idiots, you could be like this kind of awesome. And then he gets the badass fight scene, and then they're like, yeah, we can't do that. And it's just like, okay, all right, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, we need to move the plot forward, and they're going to die if they don't have this guy. So, all right, here you go. You can come with them and do this. So he's the beloved NPC, maybe, the old GM's character or something, who's coming in to be able to help out. And it's like, here you go. A great paladin there to help out with everybody. And in many of the scenes, he stole the scene, I thought. Mm-hmm. I thought he did a very, very good job for a role that could have gone poorly, and he did a great job. And again, no depth, really. Like, nobody has any depth, but it's just more... It was nice to see someone who wasn't quippy, because everyone else in the movie is quippy. Like, everyone else is making jokes the whole time, and he's the only one who does not understand humor. And so there's a nice turn in the middle of the movie to have somebody who's so straight and narrow, so straight-laced that they just don't get the humor that's going on around them, and everything is serious, and it feels like the voice of the DM. Yeah,
it's a good tone shift. I really liked that.
Yeah, the voice of the DM being like, guys, this is serious. I worked on this for hours and days for you guys to go through it. And yeah, okay, I know it's like you just make fun of everything that I come up with, but guess what? You're gonna need to do it. You just gotta go do it and be serious for like 20 minutes about the plot. Yeah, so and he kind of pushes them forward, which is nice.
Yeah, he does. And I want to know, as far as all of the troubled backstories that we heard, which is classic in a D&D party, whose was your most favorite?
God, can you remind me? I don't even remember them.
Chris had the troubled backstory with the wife that dies and his daughter that's taken from him.
Right.
Michelle has she was banished from her tribe. And then she also fell in love with the halfling and she couldn't forget either. And it's a vicious cycle. Justin Smith's was that he was trying to prove himself, but he lacked the self-esteem. And then
he's like a sorcerer who's kind of like wild magic-y, right? And doesn't really know
exactly
how well his stuff can work. But he has Elminster blood. Is that how it works?
Yeah, he's like seriously like skilled, sorcerer in his family's bloodline. So he's got a lot of potential and he has to discover his confidence. And then there's Sophia Lillis. She
can turn into a freaking owlbear, so shut the fuck up about her backstory. No one gives a shit about where she came from. She could turn into an owlbear at any time.
She was banished by tieflings or her family, and then also hated by humans. So she despises humans.
Yeah, no, she definitely by far had the shallowest of roles, but she was super useful as a plot device. So that's fine.
Yeah, they did not develop her very much at all.
But everyone would have died at some point without her. Let's just put it that way, because there
Which is
really
the classic druid. The druid saves the day so many times.
Well, yeah, there was a lot of times where it's like, oh yeah, she can morph into this, or oh yeah, she can turn into this thing that becomes useful, or oh yeah, there was so much that because she was able to wild shape, things that would have been impossible became possible and easy. And yeah, made me want to play a druid for sure. I wanted to ask you, Frank, did this movie?
You didn't answer my question.
What I don't even know.
Your favorite backstory.
Because this movie is not about backstories, I'm pretty sure I'm going to go with the shallowest backstory possible and say Sophia's.
All right. Apparently, my question was stupid.
And you know what? I don't like humans either. She's got a point. Not a big fan.
It's
not
fair.
A big fan.
Not wrong.
Yeah, that was actually the most close to the edge thing they had was like maybe
she align with.
Like she may have had more, but they're like we can't even say anti-human right now. Let's just like take all of her backstory out, about oppression or anything like that, because tieflings usually are in the Faerun thing kind of like ostracized and like people don't like them as much, right? Sure. I thought her horns were not really that significant. Like she kind of just didn't look like a tiefling. Where her tail was barely used as well. It didn't feel like it was an important prop or a part of the whole thing, which is kind of, that's a whole tiefling's identity, sort of the tail, the horns, the dark.
Yeah, there was only one thing. She used her tail to like anchor herself on something like once.
Yeah, it felt like maybe they had to remove some stuff for it because they were just like, we don't take any risks. This feels like a movie with no risks. Like I don't feel like they took a lot of risks.
I think you're absolutely right. And I mean, like you've said a couple times, which I totally agree with, they were playing it safe. They were playing it safe with this movie. The producers, the writers, the directors, they all played it pretty darn safe. One of the things that kind of threw me off that I really liked their interpretation of was major illusion. They used major illusion for Chris Pine in when he was the bard pulling the distraction and performing to the guards to pull them away from the castle. And when the sorcerer character, when Justice's character,
Simon
was Simon. There you go. That's the character name. Justice's character was pulling them away, and his foot gets stuck, so his concentration starts to break, and Chris's character starts to like freeze up. His eyes bulge out. His head sinks into his abdomen. I laughed really hard at that. That kind of shit really tickles me. And I think that they took a nice leap there, just really taking a spell and really leaning into it, and in fact, embellishing even more on it. I really liked that.
This movie felt to me, like if you read the player's handbook, you're going to love this movie. Because there's a lot of the player's handbook and the monster manual in there. It's just like, here's a monster you recognize, here's a spell that you would know, and here's another spell that you would know, and oh, here's a place that you recognize. Like every scene has some sort of little reference to the game or little reference to the actual material that they use in the game, and so it's like it's nice that way. I think there's a couple things about this that might make it hard for rewatchability though, is because it feels like a movie made by a toy company, right? Like it just feels a little bit like that because it's just like, how many products can we fit into this movie? And it felt like every scene has a new product that they have in their game, right? And so it's like another thing and another thing and another thing. And in a way, I can't say anything because the movie is called Dungeons and Dragons, and Dungeons and Dragons is a game. And it's full of these things, and all those things are kind of exciting and cool and things that we love. So I can't fault them for it. I notice it. And I'm like, I don't know. Does that make it good just because I like this thing? I don't know.
You just finished the halfling-sized version of this Talking Nerdy movie review of Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves. To get the full human size, maybe full-ling? I don't know, is that right? The opposite of halfling. To get the bigger, longer, uncut version of this, go to patreon.com/nerdpreneur. In that episode, we discuss the villains in the movie, the dominant ability scores each character has, whether that in fact was Bradley Cooper, and the biggest missed opportunity in the movie. Thanks for listening, and keep it nerdy.